Brilliant. So tonight on the Active Travel Cafe, we've got a few things lined up. We're going to start with the news roundup. If anybody's got any news from across the UK and Europe to share. We've already got hands in the air, which is exciting. So stick your hand up and I'll come round and get everybody to share their news. Then we've got Ralph Smyth. I haven't seen him yet, but I will come to you, Ralph, in a moment from the Transport Action Network. He should be here somewhere to give us an update on their court case against the government on cutting active travel funding. Oh, good, you're there. I can see you in the chat, which is excellent. And then our main speaker tonight is Sarah McMonagle from Cycling UK, who's their Director of External Affairs, and we're really excited to hear from Sarah in a bit. So that's the plan for this evening. We've only got one main speaker, so I think we should, fingers crossed, be all done by 6, but let's see how we get on. So shall we start by getting some news roundups? Andrew in Stirling, should we come to you first?
Some good news. Stirling Council have announced they're going to start enforcing the Scottish legislation on pavement parking and drop curb parking as from the 15th of July, joining Glasgow, Edinburgh and Dundee councils who've already started enforcement.
Cool, that's an excellent bit of good news just to kick us off. Everybody's smiling. I can see all the windows, people smiling, happy people. Excellent. Ruth, over to you. Thanks, Andrew.
Well, I'm afraid mine won't be good news.
Oh, come
I'm
on,
envious
Ruth.
of Roxanne, who's in Ghent. Look out for my son Jack, because he's there as well. Okay. Yes, no, very disturbing for me. Battersea, the MP took it upon herself to kind of take on people's concerns about shared use walking and cycling along the river. And I know that people do cycle too fast along the river, but the interventions that have gone in are really, really very, very nasty rumble strips, which is a line of cobbles, then a bit of gravel, then a line of cobbles, then a bit of gravel, then a line of cobbles, which if you're on any kind of bike, you know, disability bike or whatever, is incredibly uncomfortable. But the parallel road, where people do get killed, maimed and injured, there is no such intervention at all. And Battersea Bridge, I don't know if Simon Monk is on here, but he's put something on one of the groups I'm on, that there was work meant to be at Battersea Bridge, the north end, where people have been killed and injured. There is no right of way on any phase of the lights for walking or cycling. So it seems that if pedestrians say, I might be hit by a cyclist, suddenly something's done and money's put in, and it's not really looked at very nicely. But when we are killed and injured on the roads, we don't get any interventions at all, and it's harumphing. So I'm sorry to be negative to start today, but I'm actually really angry about it because I did it yesterday and it was horrible. Thank you.
Thanks, Ruth. No, that's more than fair enough. You're right to be angry, and it's a safe space, so you can share as well. Right, let's move on from Ruth to Roxanne in Ghent, who's on the move. Roxanne, over to you.
Hi, Steve. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Fantastic. Well, if you look behind me, huge indoor cycle parking. And that's just some of the bikes of the 1,650 plus people that are here at Velocity today. I'm not sure how much time I have spontaneously, but who would like to know what I've been up to the last few days?
Go for it.
So, excellent. Well, I started this adventure by taking the ferry from Harwich to the Hook of Holland, 90-kilometer cycle ride up the coast, and then popped across to Amsterdam for 2 days for the Planning the Cycling City reunion with the Urban Cycling Institute. So some of the people on this call probably know, have heard about the Fiets professor, or Markelte Brummelstroots. And many of us have been lucky to study with him on a summer school in Amsterdam. And because so many of us were coming to Europe for Velocity this year, we had a little reunion there to see what's been happening in Amsterdam and to challenge our thinking and the narratives that we use when I'm trying to understand mobility. And together over the 2 days, we had a lot of fun, a lot of bike riding, but we've also collaborated on a manifesto, which will be coming soon. We shall publish it. So I will bring that to Active Travel Cafe when that's done. I've then spent some time in Rotterdam where I suffered a collision with a motor scooter. My bike and I are a little worse for wear, but otherwise quite fine. And then took the train to Antwerp. And then yesterday I cycled from Antwerp to Ghent, another 90 kilometers or so on just amazing cycling infrastructure. And I'm just so envious that they have it. Now, Velocity. So it's day one today. And this morning we arrived in this huge warehouse type place, and hidden within it is a velodrome. So the main area for our conference was in a velodrome, and we started with a cycling race around that velodrome. We then had our opening plenary. Of course, we were welcomed by the various people from Ghent, including the Deputy Mayor, Philip, who I'm sure many of us heard speak at Velocity the other year, last year. And then we had a great welcome from Jeanette Sadiq Khan, who was the head of transport or active transport for New York. So she's the author of the book Street Fight. And her talk was just so inspiring because she basically did a roundup of all the exciting big things that have been happening around the world. And genuinely, I was just so almost surprised that there's actually so much good stuff going on. In so many places, and it started to give me a sense of velocity, not just velocity, that hang on, we're all inspiring each other, and this stuff might just actually be speeding up. And that's in the global north, the global south, all continents. Good stuff is happening. After that, I was a little nervous because I actually presented this morning. So I gave a talk called Local Voices, which was about the role that the advocacy organization plays between, those decision makers, the consultants, the developers, and local people, and how we sort of provide a conduit for communication between those two stakeholder groups. And I was really quite nervous because I was sharing the panel stage with Charlotte Guth from Paris, and I heard her speak when I was in Amsterdam, and let me tell you, we need to get her to come and talk to Active Travel Cafe, because what is going on in Paris is just even more than I knew or heard of, and their approach is phenomenal. So I'm hoping to pop down to Paris while I'm over in Europe too. We had more sessions. I attended one just to really get stuck into what's going on in Flanders, and I had lots of questions after my cycle trip yesterday. I really wanted to understand more about what I had seen, in particular, how many, oh, hello, Emily from New Zealand. Say hello to all my friends in England. Only about 60 of us. Hi, everyone. Anyway, and just the sheer number of speed pedelecs that we're seeing here. And apparently, Flanders has got 40% of the global pedelec market. So we need to keep an eye on what they're doing here, so that if someone does decide to bring in new legislation in the UK about increasing the speeds of e-bikes, well, Flanders and Belgium are ahead of the curve with us on how they're managing that conflict that might arise from different speeds. And then this afternoon, we had our final plenary, which had the representatives from Italy, Rimini, which is where Velocity will be in 2026, and Gdansk, which is where it will be next year. And of course, we learned more about Ghent. We also heard from Texas and Singapore about the challenges and opportunities they are facing. That is my day, and I'm now ready to have my drinks. But if anyone's got any quick questions, happy to answer them. I hope I didn't ramble on too much.
Brilliant, Roxy. That was an amazing little canter through. Well, it's just very exciting. Usually it's Ruth that makes us feel hugely jealous about cycling around lovely infrastructure, but you've pulled it off. That was amazing. So, well, just a quick question from me, Roxy. With that manifesto, when do you think you'll be able to present that back to us? I'm sure all of us would love to hear about it.
I'm not quite sure. I've been told ASAP. So basically, the manifesto was created with about 60 of us, again, from all over the world, from all different walks of life, so advocates, engineers, officials, and we really took on quite a unique process of how we collaborated on that. So I think there's something interesting to talk about in how we got to it, as well as what's in it. But we've now handed that over to the UCI to sort of get into some kind of format. So I'm hoping within a month or so, we'll see. Maybe I could even get someone from the UCI to come and present, because I'm sure you're all sick of hearing from me. And if it does make you feel better, I can say we've just had really miserable weather here in the last 2 weeks. And I can't tell you much about the infrastructure of Ghent because it's bucketing down out there. But tomorrow the sun will start shining and we have a bike parade, bike party to have. So hopefully we'll see a little bit more of that circulation plan. I know we're all really keen to learn more about.
Brilliant. Thanks, Roxy. Thanks for letting us know it's raining. That makes us all feel a tiny bit better.
It wasn't raining yesterday, though. 90 kilometers in just perfect cycle touring weather, perfect cycling infrastructure. So I'm glad the days worked out well for me there.
Brilliant. Brilliant.
But anyway, I'll pop off now and see you all
Thanks,
when
Roxy.
I get back.
Take care. We'll see you soon.
Bye.
Right. Next up, after that, top that, Roger, we're over to you.
Great, thank you. Well, yes, definitely jealous. Yeah, wow, awesome. That sounds so good. So, bit of news from Low Traffic Future Alliance. We have today launched what we're calling a Transport Choices Charter. It's for local, challenge. We changed the name midway through. Local Transport Choices Challenge. It's a challenge both to local authorities to sign up their ambition to reduce motor vehicle use, car dependence, for all the reasons you're well aware of. It's also to some extent a challenge to local campaign groups, which is why I'm here letting you know about it, to persuade your local authorities to sign up. We did a little survey earlier this year of the local authorities to find out where they've all got to with their local transport plans, how ambitious are they being, and how far have they got towards adopting their local transport plans. This is based on the fact that the outgoing government asked the local authorities to all draw up new local transport plans 3 years ago when they produced that transport decarbonisation plan. We thought, this is great. They're telling local authorities that good local transport plans, if they want their money, they need to have a good walking and cycling plan, a good bus service improvement plan, and these things called quantifiable carbon reduction targets. We thought, great, let's brief people to influence those. So we ran a series of workshops last year, and then, of course, the plan for drivers came along, and the government never actually released the guidance to the local authorities on what they should put in their local transport plans or how they should set these quantified carbon reductions. So we produced our own version of the guidance, and that's available online. And then we started thinking, and local authorities, when they found out we produced some guidance when the government hadn't, they were all delighted. So hopefully it's kind of being used. But then we thought, well, where have they all got to? So we did this little survey. And we found the short answer is that most of them have started reviewing their local transport plans, but not very many of them have got as far as consulting, let alone finalising their local transport plans. About 2/3 of them have started but have not consulted yet. So in other words, for most local authorities outside in England, outside London, it's all to play for. So we produced, that's the whole point of the challenge. Is we thought, well, there are 4 authorities who have either consulted on or finalised a local transport plan, who we identified as having come up with some really good practice in setting ambitious targets. So Transport for the West Midlands want to reduce car distance travel by 35% by 2030. Good, challenging stuff. Oxfordshire, a shire county, not purely urban, want to reduce car trips by 25% by 2030 and then by 33% by 2040. Reading want to reduce car use from 25% of trips at the moment, that's in or into Reading Town Centre. They want to reduce from 25% to 10% by 2040. And York want to reduce car mileage by 20% by 2030. So some good examples for all those other 65% who haven't yet consulted on to follow. So that's why I produced this challenge to say, come on, all the other local authorities, follow the lead of those 4. And as I say, it's partly a challenge to you, the local campaigners, to see if you can persuade your local authority to sign up. We've included not just signing up at bronze, silver, or gold level. We've said bronze, silver, or gold level, recognizing that firstly, it's easier for a Greater Manchester or a large city to sign up to kind of go for gold than for a Lincolnshire or wherever rural county. And secondly, none of the local authorities can be fully ambitious until they know what kind of funding they're going to be getting from whatever new government comes. So to some extent, we're kind of trying to get the local authorities declaring their level of ambition, and we'll gladly welcome particularly shire counties who sign up at bronze as a statement that they want to get to gold or silver or gold as soon as they know where they stand with national government. In the meantime, if local campaigners from particularly the Shire counties can get your county councils signing up at bronze, that'd be brilliant. Bear in mind that every Shire county, all the county councils, the non-metropolitan councils in England, all have full elections next May. So that too is part of the game plan. So I will ping a link to where the web address where you can find out about this. Do please indicate your interest in getting your local authorities signed up. Obviously, they can't sign up. They can't sign up just now because it's pre-election period when local authorities can't say anything. But it is Better Transport Week, which is why we decided to go ahead and launch it this week anyway. Brilliant. So as part of Better Transport Week, it's out there now, and I'll just
thanks, Roger. Quick question, Roger. Because that sounds excellent. It sounds to me like this is something we could return to as a full presentation, maybe post-election. Would that be okay with you?
That would be, I'd be more than happy to do that, and then we can discuss, well, how can you get your local authority signed up and all the rest of it.
It sounds like we should do that, so that'd be excellent. Thanks, Roger. Okay, we're going to go speedy through Amy and H. So Amy, over to you, and then we're over to our Ray Smyth first, and then over to Sarah. So if we could keep it short, Amy, sorry.
Sure. No, it's a quick shout out to anyone in Manchester, Steve. It's, there's a consultation into Vision Zero strategy, and we're really disappointed by it. Thought it was a real missed opportunity. So we've done a blog on it and highlights our concerns. Closes next week, and we're just urging anybody who travels in Manchester to read it. It's short, only 10 pages, and to note the concerns we've raised. Thank you.
Thanks, Amy. And have you popped a link to that in the chat? Brilliant stuff. I'm making sure we all read it. That's lovely. Thank you. H, over to you.
Yeah, just to catch on one thing, but my sins, I go to the local Quaker Climate Action Group, and I don't know if there's any climate action groups run by the Friends or Quakers anywhere else in the UK. There seem to be, but we discovered that there's climate action funding for areas in Scotland. Renfrewshire haven't apparently spent theirs, so we were desperately trying to figure out how we could spend some of it. And I wondered whether Andrew knew of anything else or anybody else knew of climate action hubs, getting people to use sustainable transport, and rather like Climate Action Stratham, they actually run their own bus service and run their own bike hire and car hire.
Thanks, H. Well, if anybody does have a lead on that for you, so let's get them to pop it in the chat. And let you help spend some money on that real action on the ground. Brilliant, thanks, H. Well, that's our UK roundup over with. So before we come to you, Sarah, we're going to get a quick update from Ray Smyth from the Transport Action Network on how their court case has gone. So Ray, over to you. You're on mute, Ray.
That should work now. Can you hear me? I'm just trying to share my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Excellent. All right, so I've put this as still smiling. For those that don't know, unfortunately, we lost our case, but I want to give you a quick update as to what happened and what's next. So just as to kind of warm things up a bit, I've got a quick question, a little multiple choice for you all. If you had to cut as part of an efficiency and savings review that was about prioritizing money away from lower value and lower priority programs, which of these three options would you cut? And please put a letter A, B, or C in the chat. So the first one is the kind of the social benefits, practical and popular, save money on health. The second is on things that are important to the environment. And then the third is the kind of, the economic benefits on the best financial returns on investment. What would you cut? I can see Gary says none of the above. Tim has said C on the best returns. H has gone for the green vote. Another C. No one wants the social benefits and health benefits. No, obviously not. Well, I think any final calls? Well, it's actually a trick question because the Treasury, and it was the Treasury, it turned out, decided to cut the measures that actually were good for all these three. In other words, active travel. because just a year and a few months, but actually 9 months before, the government had published the cycling and walking investment strategy, the second one, that explained why active travel was good for all these three different things. And our case revealed finally that the Department for Transport wanted to protect active travel funding, but that the Treasury intervened at the very last minute. Literally hours before the spending review, the Treasury came in and said, right, we don't like this active travel. It's important enough, you've got to cut it. And active travel faced the biggest cuts of any part of the transport budget. We still don't know how much it was the officials or the politicians because there were a lot of redactions, but it was the Treasury that cut active travel. And we got our judgment about 10 days ago, and there are a few different key things I want to share with you very briefly. So one of the most important reasons we thought for the case was to give stability to the funding for active travel. You remember that in 2015, Parliament passed the Infrastructure Act, and the certainty and stability of funding for active travel was written into law as being really important. Now, on the screen, you can see what the judge said. Basically, he reinterpreted what was written by Parliament, adding the word intended. So, making it conditional, vague, and that meant that the government was justified in cutting funding because it was never a promise, it was just an aspiration. We said, well, if you want to change the funding, you've actually got to use what's called a variation procedure, a bit of the law that says if you want to vary the amount of money, you've got to step back and make sure you've got enough money for the objectives you want. Now, the judge said that wasn't relevant. That would only be relevant, and you can see here, the bottom, where, for example, the government might want to, remove bike lanes and spend the money on electric car charging. Now, the irony here is basically that's what's happened. The government has cut funding for bicycles and walking, and is protecting the money for electric cars. So feels like a bit of an injustice there. Another thing, and a really important part of the statutory scheme, is that you're supposed to decide whether you've got enough money to meet objectives. For example, increasing the number of walking and cycling and sort of walking to school journeys. Now, the Department for Transport even said, because the Treasury imposed these cuts at the last minute, we're working through the implications. But the judge decided it's unreal to say the Secretary of State did not take into account the likely effect of the cuts. This I struggle with, to be honest, because, as I said, the evidence was that the officials hadn't had time to work it out. Now, there's lots of information. We're going to try and disclose it. As you can see from the bottom of the screen, this was page 381 of a very large legal bundle. So we're just trying to get some of this taken out into a more user-friendly format. But this shows some of the limited information given to ministers. Obviously lots about the benefits of active travel, but not really what would happen if you cut the funding by 2/3. Other parts of the case were around, the benefits for air quality and climate. Now, as you saw from the slide near the start, the government said that active travel was important to cut pollution and to cut carbon emissions. But the judge decided because DEFRA and DFT hadn't worked out a quantified relationship between active travel projects and particulate levels, they didn't need to consider it. Now, this is nuts because the government's own research says that you need to cut driving to cut particulates because so much comes from brake, tar, and road wear now rather than exhausts. And on climate, the judge said there was a rational level of consideration, didn't need to think anymore. Unfortunately for us, but also for the government, The Friends of the Earth Client Earth legal decision came out just days after our case, saying that the government's carbon plan was legally inadequate. Now, this does, we think, give us strong grounds for an appeal on that ground. So, was it all worth it? Well, we shone light on the spending processes. We got a huge amount of information out. And as we face the toughest spending review in generations, like later this year with the new government, this is really useful information to know how the processes work. We got a report published that had been hidden away by officials since 2020, showing the government knew all along they weren't investing enough in active travel. We also slowed down the plan for drivers because officials were focused on fighting the court case and also able to tell ministers that if they did anything more, anything worse, they'd face more legal challenges. And I think most importantly of all, we raised awareness about the need to focus on governance rather than simply asking for more money. Because as we've seen, the government can very easily take money away. But if you have governance structures, that can be really important in making sure there's the evidence there to show that you can't simply take away funding without scuppering other targets like climate and air quality. Now, here's a quick table from the report that we uncovered. I know a report that Roger Geffen, who's on the call, was very keen to get out. You know, across all the different scenarios, it showed that much more needed to be invested in walking and cycling than the government was investing already. Now, the government ministers were saying, we're investing a record amount, but they knew all along it wasn't enough. So wrapping up now, so I'm trying to keep to 10 minutes. We've got three options where to go next. We can simply sit back and hope the next government will be more ambitious. To be honest, that's not something I'm getting a strong feel from the manifestos, that they're really keen on active travel. We could try to seek a legal amendment to the Infrastructure Act, but there's a risk that active travel isn't a priority and any amendment comes too late. Or we could try to appeal the judgment. That keeps a foot in the door. It puts active travel to the top of the in tray, and it highlights the continuing injustice of active travel cuts. So what next? Well, a really important one, everyone, is that the current cycling and walking investment strategy runs out in March. So the government has a legal duty to publish a new strategy by then. But actually, local transport authorities, LTAs, they need funding certainty much sooner than that. We also need consultation, if not co-production, with local transport authorities, because with devolution shifting more power, not necessarily more funding to them, they need to have much more of a role. Note that there was no consultation for the second CWIS, there was for the first. There's also supposed to be a progress report to Parliament about, you know, how much money was actually spent on active travel. It's unclear when this will come out, especially with an election, and whether it will be in time or whether it will simply come out after the next CWIS is published. That will be too late. There are important interactions with the new carbon plan that the other court case says the government has to publish by May. And also plans to cut pollution. But the risk here is that a spending review in the autumn is the tail that wags the dog. You know, there's not enough money for active travel, and therefore it can't be seen as a solution next year onwards for climate and environment. Finally, there is a simplification of funding streams. At the moment, there's about 30 different ring-fenced funds for local authorities. That's a bit too much as the money shrinks. But the alternative of simply a single funding pot could mean that our active travel is squeezed even more. So the next steps, we would need to raise funding pretty quickly to go to the Court of Appeal. We're going to try to publish papers from the court case so you can see what was revealed. And we also want to engage with the next government for credible ambition, for credible funding, and decent governance. Thank you very much. That is a rush through attempt, and I hope that made sense. If not, put something in the chat. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Rafe. I really appreciate that. Really do. And thanks for the update. We'll make sure we share your update on the website as well, obviously, so people can have a look. Could I ask, if possible, if anybody's got any questions, if they could share them in the chat for Rafe? Are you able to stay around, Rafe?
Yeah, I can stay till about 5 to, so I've got another 20 minutes.
Excellent. That's
Have
lovely.
you
I'm
got the
just conscious
screen
of
back,
time.
Steve?
No, I had a moment there where I had myself twice on screen, which is always scary and horrible. So I'm glad that's over. Thanks, Rafe. That's amazing and well done on all that. Absolute Herculean effort. Sarah, I'm really sorry. We've run over by about five or 6 minutes, so we're late coming to you. Do apologise. But you're our second speaker from Ghent. It's the Ghent edition.
Hi everyone. I can't actually believe this is my first active travel cafe, but it was actually one of our trustees, Robin Tucker, who suggested I come along and talk to you guys about our new strategy. So yeah, thanks for having me. And I hope to come to more of these because they sound really, really useful. And I've already learned a lot in the last half hour. So yeah, hopefully you'll see more of me in future weeks. Let me just share my screen. I've got a PowerPoint, not to kill you with slides, but there aren't too many. I'm going to just talk them through for about 10, 15 minutes and share a video just to make it a bit more exciting as well. So bear with. Can you see the slides?
Yeah, we've got those. Thanks, Sarah.
Great, lovely, thank you. So yeah, just to introduce myself very quickly, I am Director of External Affairs at Cycling UK, and I've been at the charity for just over a year now, which has gone very, very quickly. That's quite scary. So my department leads on campaigns, policy and public affairs, and marketing and communication. So all the kind of external stuff squished together in one directorate. The idea being that hopefully that makes it as joined up as possible. Before that, I was a countryside charity in the environmental sector called CPRE. And before that, I was in the construction industry. So I have done a bit of sector hopping, but you'd be surprised how much of a kind of policy golden thread runs through those sorts of different sectors and leads you kind of neatly into transport and active travel. And I'm assuming most of you know plenty about Cycling UK, but just in case there's anyone on the call that doesn't know much about our organisation, we've been around for 146 years, so a lot longer than my 1 year at the charity. And we've got 71,000 members. That would be well into the kind of 100,000 plus, including supporters, but we've got 71,000 members, which makes us one of the top 100 membership organisations in the UK, which I think we should shout about a lot more because that's pretty amazing. And our membership is holding really strong, whereas other membership organisations, I think, are struggling a little bit and seeing a slight decline. So I think that's really positive. And we're particularly known for our campaigning and our behaviour change programme work. So lots of grassroots work where we work with communities, facilitate communities to get more people on a bike. And I've been asked to kind of talk you through our new strategy today. So I've got a slimmed down version of this presentation. So there's plenty of time for questions as well. But just to very quickly recap on why a new strategy. Well, one reason is that the last one timed out. So that took us to 2023. But we did really want to take a proper look at the kind of scope and ambition of the strategy as well, and making sure that we were pushing in the right direction and concentrating on the right things. And I guess we did ask ourselves some difficult questions when we came to the strategy review, because although as an organisation we've had lots of success and I could rattle through loads of them, but one that really does spring to mind is the very concrete changes that we and lots of people on this call helped secure around the highway code, for example. But there's lots more besides. But despite that success as a campaigning body, in terms of shifting the dial in the kind of big picture sense, cycling numbers haven't increased. And also, you know, it's been quite depressing in the last couple of years, seeing this sort of cross-party consensus on cycling. It felt like it existed for a while, sort of started to ebb away. And it really is kind of smack in the middle of some very tricky kind of culture wars, which is doing nothing for our cause. So yeah, we have seen the government, like we were just been talking about, rode back on their funding commitments, their funding commitments that were already inadequate. They rode back on them further, cutting the budget last year by 2/3. And yeah, the whole kind of external environment in terms of where we operate feels quite different at the moment. Obviously, the economic situation is very, very challenging. We've got a cost of living crisis, and the climate change emergency is very much being felt. So there's lots of stuff happening internally and externally that made us feel and reflect that we needed to take quite a bold new approach to our next 5 to 10 year strategy. Just a quick word on kind of how we got there. So as you would expect, we did lots and lots and lots of consultation because these things are really important and not to be rushed. So we actually started the process 18 months ago, well before I even started at Cycling UK. So there was a good kind of 18-month period between conversations kicking off initially and then the strategy being launched, which was last week. So it was a process that was led by trustees, but very much supported by an agency called Lucent, which is a strategy agency that were really, really helpful in terms of helping guide us through the process. Yeah, we kind of chopped our key stakeholders into particular groups. Staff was a very important one for us, so we wanted to really carefully listen to the views of staff, likewise members and supporters. But we also went out and spoke to a lot of external partners and stakeholders. So I'm sure some of you on the call were involved in this, but we had interviews and surveys and workshops with stakeholders across the UK, including Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, to make sure that we were really hearing your feedback about the role Cycling UK is playing and could play in the future. And eventually the strategy was approved by trustees in October last year. And since that time, we've been preparing for the launch. And if I can get this working, I would like to share this video with you. Can you hear that? See if the technology doesn't let us down.
We can hear it, Sarah. It's just buffering a little bit.
Okay, let's try it.
Do you need to upgrade the hotel Wi-Fi to the premium package?
Can you hear that?
No, nothing at the moment.
No, okay. I suspected this might happen. Sharing videos on calls is a recipe for disaster. So what I'll do is I will share that with you in the chat box after we've had our chat. And if anyone wants to watch it, then they're very welcome to. But as well as kind of producing an actual strategy video, we wanted to...
Riding a bike is something that stays...
we wanted to do something a little bit different and something a bit more inspiring as well. So we commissioned an agency based in Yorkshire to create a video for us, which we premiered at the launch of our strategy last week and have been pushing online ever since. So anyone who sees it, if you like the message in the video and you feel you can, then we'd be really grateful if you could share it with your networks on social media. But without further ado, to kind of actually sort of go into the strategy a little bit more now, here we've got our vision, mission and purpose set out. So our vision is for happier, healthier and greener lives through cycling. So a big focus of the new strategy is to really kind of double down on the benefits of cycling and make sure we position cycling not as an end in itself, but as something that can really unlock these wider benefits. And we've particularly chosen those three, but we know that there are other benefits to cycling, like I've mentioned already, in terms of the economy and so on. I won't read all of these words because that's a bit boring, but I'm happy to share these slides afterwards so you can look at them in your leisure. But yeah, we've tried to capture something here that we felt was inspiring, but also kind of nodded to a slightly different direction for Cycling UK. To go into a little bit more detail in terms of the objectives themselves, again, they're not that these are very high level, so they won't give you the clearest sense of the actual projects and campaigns that sit underneath them, but hopefully give you an idea of which way we're headed. So the first one, increase transport choice by enabling and encouraging more people to cycle local journeys. That's really all about getting people out of their cars and onto their bikes. We didn't want to mention cars specifically for framing purposes and not to kind of stoke the kind of anti-car or I don't know, identity politics, culture war stuff. But that's really what the objective is all about. The second one, moving across, is to improve perceptions of cycling so that everyone sees the benefits. That's one that I personally am most excited about. It's going to be really hard, but we really want to create a kind of groundswell of public support for cycling over the next 5 to 10 years, knowing that it's the public's view that will really then shape, in the end, the policymakers' view. If everyone really does see the benefits of cycling, the wider benefits, even if they don't cycle themselves, and start to kind of see it as an issue that they want to kind of flag and hear about at general elections like we are at the moment, although we're not hearing enough about cycling, nowhere near enough, then that's when we'll get that consistency of funding, that consistency of pro-cycling policy. So that's a really key one for Cycling UK over the next 10 years. The third one is to boost the number and diversity of people who cycle, which I think is quite self-explanatory. We won't be satisfied if the numbers are just going up, but we're not also mixing up the diversity of cyclists, people who cycle. I am trying to use that language more now, again, to sort of help row back from this idea that you're either a cyclist or a pedestrian or a driver. We know that's very much not the case. The fourth one there, make cycling an even more positive experience. Cycling is a fantastic experience, but we know it could be even better. And a lot of the work that we already do around things like developing new routes and addressing the state of our roads and traffic will sit under that objective. And the fifth one is the kind of catch-all golden thread where we really just want to be the best charity we can be so that we can deliver those other four more kind of external facing objectives. So I'll go into a tiny bit more detail now on each of those so you can get a better sense of what they mean. But transport choice is, you know, framing that a lot of us are using in the sector now, which I think is really good. A lot of the things that we'll be doing here will include campaigning, advocacy, policy and public affairs. We really do want to see an increased investment in cycling infrastructure. There's a reason why that's our kind of top ask in our general election manifesto in the run-up to July the 4th. We see that as being absolutely crucial, and we've got a strong evidence base for why that's important and what it can deliver in terms of those wider benefits, having commissioned the IPPR research back in February. We also really want to do some framing research, which I thought this group would be particularly interested in, because at the end of the process, we want to gift it to the wider world and make sure that everyone can make use of it. But in case you're not aware, the example we've been using is the Joseph Rowntree Foundation, who commissioned a big piece of framing research with the Frameworks Institute a few years ago on how to frame poverty as an issue. And people still talk about this as being a real kind of game changer in terms of the impact that that sector was having. And having developed that research, they did give it to their partners and allies in the poverty sector, other charities that were working in that space, so that everyone could make use of it. And we would like to do exactly the same thing on cycling and walking. So we haven't actually gone out there yet with a tender, but that's very much the plan for the second half of the first year of the new strategy. So we can keep you posted, and obviously, as and when that is developed, I'll be very happy to come back to a future meeting of this group to talk you through it. But yeah, we think that's really important in terms of making sure that we are talking about our issues in as engaging a way as possible, not accidentally falling into any of those framing traps that are all too easy to fall into, and that we are therefore able to kind of change those public perceptions and improve those public perceptions of cycling. Boosting the number and diversity of people who cycle. A big part of that will be around our marketing and communications. We want to do a lot more to platform people who sort of challenge the idea of what a typical cyclist looks like or who might ride a bike. So you'll be seeing a lot of stuff from Cycling UK, really good case study work across our, social media platforms, as well as kind of selling into the traditional media, really engaging stories of people who, are already enjoying the benefits of cycling, whether they're environmental or to do with their mental health and well-being or their physical health. We're going to be doing a lot more to kind of tell the human story of our work. I think someone said to me quite early on when I joined Cycling UK that the evidence is there now. We've won the argument on why cycling is a good thing, but we haven't won all the hearts and minds. So we are determined to win hearts and minds over the next 5 to 10 years. And really good storytelling is going to be a big part of that. Making cycling an even more positive experience. Yeah, particularly keen to kind of develop more off-road routes over the next few years. We are working with a funder who's keen to kind of help us do that, which is really good news. It's something that Cycling UK is really proud of. And yeah, we've got some fantastic routes in all 4 corners of the UK at the moment, but we want to do more. And there will definitely be a big push for that over the next few years, in the next 2 years even. And then the perceptions one, I feel like I've talked about a fair bit already, so I might not say too much more on this. And then finally, a bit more about what we mean in terms of increasing our impact as a charity. We've got a really good, solid income stream from the 71,000 members I mentioned earlier, but we know that we can broaden our income into other areas, things that we're not really doing very well at the moment. For example, working really closely with trusts and foundations. That's something that other charities do really well. We haven't really maximized our opportunities there. And with our new vision, really kind of leaning into things like the environmental benefits of cycling, there could potentially be an opportunity, for example, to work with more environmental trusts and foundations. So that's something that we'll be keen to explore over the next few years. And something I'm a bit daunted by, but also very excited by, is that we're about to kick off a brand refresh, not a rebrand. We're not going to change our name, but we do feel that our brand could work better for us. I think maybe a few years ago, there was a brand review at Cycling UK, and I think at the time the brand was thought to be quite staid and maybe a bit fuddy-duddy. So we were keen to kind of make it more accessible, more family friendly. I wonder if the pendulum maybe swung too far the other way. And I think there's something that we could maybe get a bit more in the middle that is a kind of, yeah, a brand that works for us in terms of like the new strategy and direction that we're going in at the moment. So again, we can come back and talk to you about that at future meetings if it's of interest. And then I did have a very cheeky any other business, because I told some colleagues that I was coming to the Active Travel Cafe today, and I had 2 requests from different teams. So one was from our governance team. We're looking to attract new members to our board. We've got a fantastic board, but we do have a few gaps that we'd like to fill at the moment. So at the moment, the rules dictate that you need to be a member of Cycling UK for at least 12 months in order to apply, but I'm assuming there might be a few Cycling UK members on the call. So if you are and you're interested in potentially being a trustee, then do pop me a message and let me know, and we can talk you through it. The deadline for that is the 3rd of July, so that's coming up fairly soon now. But yeah, we're particularly interested to receive applications from women and people from diverse backgrounds, but really, ultimately, it's about the skill sets, which we've got a clear sense of, and I can talk you through. And then the other one was from our campaigns team. We've got a supporter action at the moment out there, asking people to email their prospective parliamentary candidates in their own constituency, calling on them to sign Cycling UK's pledge, where we've got 6 manifesto commitments in advance of the next general election, but there's 3 that we've pulled out as being particularly important around investment in cycling infrastructure, improving and strengthening the planning process, and delivering an integrated transport strategy that increases transport choices. So those are the 3 things that we're looking for candidates to pledge. We've had lots of Green PPCs pledge and some Lib Dems, and only a handful of Labour and Conservative so far. And given they're the 2 dominant parties, that does feel like a bit of a gap. So anything that you can do to help encourage more Labour and Conservative PPCs to sign that pledge would be really, really, yeah, gratefully received. But yeah, happy to take any questions and have a bit of a discussion.
Brilliant. Thanks, Sarah. That was excellent. Yeah, if you pop your slides down, we'll just bring some people in. I don't think, Sally, did you want you popped a question in the chat, but did you want me to ask it, or are you happy to jump on?
Can you just, well, I can.
Oh, I think we've lost her.
I'd ask it.
Go on then. Oh yeah, okay. So Sarah, what Sally's question is will cycling UK target behaviour change programs at places which have improved infrastructure, given recent academic work suggesting it is ineffective on its own?
Sorry, Steve, can you say that again?
The question was, will you be targeting that behaviour change research into areas where, let me get this exactly right,
Or
into
was it the framing
places
research or?
no, yeah. So well, actually, your behaviour change programs that you mentioned,
Okay.
whether they'll Sally's referring to recent academic work which suggests that improved infrastructure on its own is ineffective and needs to be twinned with behaviour change programs. So wondering whether that's part of your thinking.
That's a really good point, and I can definitely take that back to the team to reassure that, yeah, we completely agree that infrastructure is important, but behaviour change is going to continue to be a big part of Cycling UK's focus. We're keen to get the new ministerial team out to one of our big bike revival projects early doors later this year, so they can understand and appreciate the value of that scheme. Because yeah, whenever there's a new government, there is a bit of nervousness that, you know, they won't necessarily understand the impact and benefit of these things. So to reassure that, yeah, we really do see the value, and cross-referencing those and everything else is really important.
Brilliant. Thanks, Sarah. And we've got a question from Tim Warnes in Birmingham. Tim asks, what do earlier campaigns like safe roads, traffic offences and the law, where do they fit in the new strategies?
Yeah, I think a lot of that stuff would sit under kind of making cycling the most positive experience it can be. But yeah, maybe just to sort of dive into that a little bit more. Something that we're keen to do at Cycling UK is develop a kind of priority campaigning model. So at the moment, we've got quite a few different topics and policy issues that we chug along with and advocate on to one degree or another. But what we'd really like to do is identify 2 to 3 maps a year, ideally issues that can be campaigned on UK-wide, even if the policy context varies slightly, that are kind of priority campaigns that we do put more resource into. Because I think one of the main things I've learned in my years as a kind of campaigner or lobbyist is that you're so much more impactful if you concentrate your resources on a smaller number of issues. So what we'd like to develop is 2 to 3 priority campaigns that, yeah, tick the boxes that the charity needs, whether it's kind of the most politically salient issues, but also thinking about things that our members and supporters particularly care about, that are going with the grain of the new government to some extent. There'll be a different kind of criteria that we match this against, but also then having a kind of lighter touch program of work that sits behind that. So it wouldn't be that anything that isn't a priority campaign isn't taken forward, but just really making that clear distinction that XYZ issue is a huge one for Cycling UK, and these other ones are going to be kind of more on the back burner.
Thanks, Sarah. Ruth, have you got a question for Sarah?
Yeah, hi, thanks, Sarah. I was there at the event. It was fab. And thank you very much.
Great.
My bugbear always, and everyone on the call knows this, is about how cycling is, and walking, in fact, is down to charitable status, and it depends on how much you get and how much seat table you might get. I just wonder, though, maintenance, which I also bang on about, is there's no point having cycle lanes, walking paths, all this kind of stuff, if they're overgrown, not maintained, blah, blah, blah. And we know that governments don't fund councils enough, and councils don't see it as an essential thing. So in your strategy, I haven't read it word for word, I would hope, though, that maintenance features, because there's no point anyone cycling along a route and then suddenly it's all broken apart, blah, blah, and we have to rely on Sustrans charity to repair it. It really, Cycling UK absolutely has got to, you know, focus on that. Like Route 4, which I always go on about, is wonderful in some places and then a disaster in others. Well, if you've decided to go on a bike ride with children or with luggage or with someone in a recumbent, they cannot complete their journey and there is no diversion. So that has to be part of your strategy.
Absolutely. And Ruth, if you did read our strategy, you wouldn't see anything about maintenance in there because it doesn't go into that kind of detail. It's only really a 12-page document that's very kind of top level. But completely agree with what you're saying. And just like what we'd argue with roads, they need to be maintained really well. And that applies to cycle lanes just as much. So it's not just about the shiny new infrastructure, but making sure that we're looking after our existing infrastructure. And the IPPR research that was published in February that we commissioned, in that report, they're calling for the government to crank up to 2 billion a year by the end of the first parliament. And that would include not just new infrastructure, but maintaining existing infrastructure as well. So completely agree with you there.
And Sarah, just one more from me, and then we'll be close to wrapping up. I know you got a thing at 6, so apologies about this, but just one thing, which is, it's very important during an election period to feel very frustrated all the time and rant at the telly. And the two topics that haven't cropped up in the debates obviously are Brexit, which is insane that it's not been a point of political debate. But given where we started with Rishi Sunak signalling, sort of firing the starting gun on a culture war around low traffic neighborhoods and net zero, and that kind of disappeared, didn't it? And I don't know whether you were limbering up ready for active travel to become this sort of flashpoint in the electoral campaign. That hasn't really happened. In fact, it was in the chat earlier in this session how disappointing it is that we haven't been talking about this or transport more generally enough in the election campaign. So what's your take on the sort of political tea leaves in the bottom of the cup?
Yeah, I mean, we did have a bit of a moment, didn't we? I think it was about 10 days ago. I was just logging off work on a Friday night, and someone sent me the press release from the Conservatives about the backing drivers bill. And I was like, oh my God. And we got a kind of copy of the embargo press release and issued a statement in response. And I think that was the Conservatives' attempt to just sort of dipping their toe and see if they could get any traction with that. But it really just was a damp squib. So I don't think that, I mean, transport is very rarely one of the top 5 issues in a general election. It really does come down to things like the economy and, cost of living, NHS always, the environment. It doesn't really manage to kind of get up there in terms of one of the top 5 issues. So I think that after the Uxbridge by-election, I think they were still tempted to see whether it was going to be something that would help give them traction. And the Conservatives are just throwing everything at the wall and seeing what sticks. And I don't think it works. So I think they have left that alone. But I have to say, I was disappointed with some of the framing around Labour's manifesto, that even though the policies themselves looked decent enough around some of this stuff like investing in potholes and so on, the framing was terrible. And the idea that they're trying to match the Conservatives, talking about being on the side of drivers, is so depressing. So we've obviously got a big job of work to do there, because I'm really hoping that the new government, there'll be a reset and we can, be blank piece of paper, we can kind of stop talking about cycling like it's a wedge issue, like it's part of the culture wars, and try to get back to that kind of cross-party consensus. But Labour moving in that direction was quite worrying. So I think, we can't take anything for granted at this point.
Which I'm sure is a phrase uttered in Labour circles on a daily basis. So no, we're all waiting to see what happens. But a very good point. Well, listen, I'm conscious that you have to be off, Sarah, to another event on the packed Velo City schedule that you've got over in Ghent. But thank you so much for coming to talk to us. And certainly, if you would like to use us as a sounding board, please do come again. And certainly that framing research, I know we've been around that particular Cyclops Junction a few times on Active Travel Cafe. So if you want to come back and talk to us about framing, we'll lap it up. I promise.
Great. I love framing too. Okay, I'll definitely take you up on that. Thank you. And nice to see you all. Hope that was useful.
Brilliant.
Have a good evening.
Well, thank you very much, Sarah. And thank you everybody for joining us. We'll be back again next week. We've got another couple of episodes. As I said earlier, we've got the same link will work for the rest of this summer's episode. So please join us next week for another fun-packed Active Travel Cafe. Thank you, Adam, for helping me, and have a lovely evening, everybody.